Now we're going to install the power unit bracket. With this, you've got the bracket that holds the power unit here. You have the two holes on top of the bracket that will mount on top of your top cap. In your kit, you get a number 8 Allen wrench. You do a lock washer and a flat washer. There's 2 of them. Now in your kit, they usually send 2 extra. In case you lose them, you got extras in there, but you're only going to be using 2. Now you have a choice of having the power unit mounted this direction, so it's inside, no wider than the lift, or it can be mounted on the outside, like you see a lot of lifts out on the market. But it's wider. So if you're not in a width restraint, you can put it on the outside. So you have 2 different locations to put this. I usually like it on the inside, so I'm not running into it when I'm walking through the garage. And so what I'll do is I'll get on top of the lift with my ladder, and then there's 4 holes on top of that top cap, and I'm going to put 2 using to hang this. I'll show you that right now. So with using the bolts, this is already threaded up here at the top. I'm going to insert them in. Use my number 8 Allen wrench. Now before I tighten them down, I want to use the 2 flat washers, and I'm going to shim this up so that the shim is going to go right in here on the top cap and on the other side of the bracket, making this to where when I tighten it down, it'll set level. Okay, now we're going to we have 4 bolts that are going to go in for your power unit, and what we do is they're going to go onto the outer holes, the big holes on the outer. This one right here, we want to shorten up our bolt. So we're going to put a nut on first, take it about 3/4 of the way down, stick it through the hole, and put a nut on the back side. Adjust it to where you have about 3/4, ½ inch showing of threads. Then the rest of them, you're just going to put the bolt through, put on the jam nut. This makes it easy to put the power unit on because you have your studs now hanging out, and you can just put the power unit right up to it. Leave them a little loose so you have some play when you put that power unit on. So now we're going to put the power unit. You can see it has a bracket on the back side that'll match these bolts. We're going to lift it up and put it on. This power unit is a 1.5 horse, 20 amp, 120 volt power unit. Once you get it on the studs, start one of the nuts, and then it'll hold it in place so that you can put the rest of them on. If we can show right here, the reason we want to shorten this up because this will run into our startup capacitor, and so we shorten that bolt up to where now we can put our nut on easily, and we'll be able to tighten that down without it hitting the capacitor. Is the whole reason for that extra nut in there. 9/16 wrench. And there we go. We have the power unit mounted onto our bracket. Now that we have the power unit mounted, we're going to want to attach our 90-degree O-ring fitting. You can see there's a small O-ring inside there with a jam nut. So you're going to take that up to where it just comes up to the O-ring, and then this is going to screw into this open port. And you just turn it down to where it just starts to feel snug against that O-ring. Just like so, and angled back toward the post. Okay, now we're going to take the other end of the hose and hook to this 90-degree fitting. The 3/4 inch wrench. Snug this down. And then you'll want to adjust this to where it's just not touching the tank. So it's just right at it. And then with the 3/4 inch wrench, tighten up this jam nut. And that seals that O-ring against the housing to where now this doesn't turn, it's sealed, we're ready to go. And this hose goes around and connects to the track that goes to the cylinder. Okay, so now we're ready to add the oil. You'll need a small funnel because this has a small port into this tank. So you need a small funnel with a little hole. Then an assistant to hold that for you. And then what we use is AW32 hydraulic oil. You can buy that at O'Reilly's, AutoZone, Advanced Autos, anywhere. You're going to need about almost 3 gallons of it to fill it completely. Okay, so now we have filled it to where there's a max line right here on this that says minimum, and then you can see on the edge right here, it's full right to the top. That's the amount we need to have. Okay, we're ready to now put power to this. This is, like I told you a minute ago, it's a 120 volts, and it's a 20 amp breaker that you'll want to plug it in. Just most garages are wired that direction. If you have to use an extension cord, make sure you use a 12 gauge heavy duty cord, not a 16 or 14 because you lose too much amperage drop in that cord. Once it's plugged in, now you'll see that the oil is full. We're going to push the button here and that's going to run. It's going to pump oil out of this tank and fill up the big cylinder that's underneath this ramp. This usually takes a couple minutes before you'll start seeing any movement of the cables or the lift moving. Okay. Now, at this point, you're raising this up. You want to make sure that all your cables stay on the pulleys as things starting to get tight. You want them to stay on to that point so it picks it up tight against your pulley sheaves. Okay, and we have liftoff. What you'll want to do is run this all the way to the top the first time out before you do any adjusting. You'll hear the locks clicking as it's going up through each one of the holes. At this point, we have not adjusted them, so they're not clicking all at the same time. We'll do that in just a minute. Now that we have the lift fully extended to the top, you'll notice that the cylinder rod is all the way retracted. That means you're at the full lifting point, and that means at this point the cylinder is full of oil and the reservoir only has a little bit left. When the lift goes all the way down, it pushes the fluid back into this reservoir and fills it back up, and then the cylinder is empty. You'll notice on our lifts that we have some wheel blocks on our cable block that keeps this retainer straight, so it doesn't allow it to turn and scratch up the bottom of your lifts. You can see that we also use long swedges so that the cable end has got a long swedge on the end of it, just helping you more security built into your cable to where you don't have to worry about that swedge coming off. If you look at the opposite end over here, You can see the cables going around each one of the pulleys, and then we also have cable keepers. These bolts that run up right beside it it's right next to them pulleys. The cable cannot come out of the groove. That's a problem with four-post lifts, is that a lot of times that cable will jump off of the pulley, and then you've got problems. And with these being in here, that eliminates that problem. Now that we had the lift fully extended, we want to come down to bleed all the air out of the system. So we're going to open up the lock handles, and you'll notice that opens up the locks on all four corners. Then you have a hydraulic release valve you're going to push down, and that's going to let the lift come down. It's going to come down slow until all the air is out of the system. When it gets down to the end, you're going to see the tank here, air bubbles, bubbling up into that tank and letting you know that it has bled all the air out of the system. One of the reasons why this goes slow is because built into our cylinder, we have a flow restrictor. It's a small orifice that only allows that fluid to come in and out at a slow pace. So that if you ever had a hose break, you don't have to worry about the lift dropping at a fast speed, because it's only going to come out as fast as it does right now. It just would go onto the floor instead of back into the tank if a hose would happen to break. First time down, you're also going to notice that it's going to align the post. When these cross arms go down with those collars wrapped around them, it will straighten up the post and line them up automatically as you go down. Once I get past the bottom lock, I can let go of my lock handle because there's nothing else for it to catch on. And you might be able to hear or see the air is now bubbling back into this tank, letting me know that I am bleeding all the air out of the cylinder. Okay, so now that we've got it all the way down, we've bled the air into the tank here. Now we're completely ready to adjust the lift to the level of your floor. So what we do is we raise it up. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this slider that's sliding up the post as a gauge. So we're going to make this to be flush to one of the lock holes. So the top of this slider is flush to the bottom of a lock hole on this post. And then I'm going to come over to this post. As you see, this one is 1/4 to 1/2 inch below being flush. So to adjust that, all we're going to do is at the top of this cable there's a nut. We're going to tighten that up 1/2 inch, and that will raise this up to where this is flush. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other 4 posts. This one over here is a full inch, 1.25 inches down. So we will adjust these up by tightening up those cables, and then we want those locks to all fire at the same time and be good and level. Okay, now we're going to check for the levelness to make sure that after we've adjusted it that they're all level. I've got this one flush to the bottom of a lock. Let's look over to this side over here. You'll notice I'm flush here. Let's go to the back post, and you'll see that we're flush here to the bottom, and the other post we're flush here. That means that now that the lift is setting level to the floor. So if your floor has a little slant on it, the lift will set just like it would be on the floor. So the whole object of having it level is that you want the locks to fire all at the same time when it goes up. And so now I'll turn it on, and you'll listen to the lock and you'll hear the one click, meaning that all the locks are engaging at the same time. Okay, now that you've seen that the gauge are fully unlocked, at this point we're not setting on the lock. All of our pressure is on the cylinder and the cable at this time. So what we're going to do with the lock tooth engaged into the post, now we're going to lower it down, and you're going to see it trap itself onto that lock. with down pressure setting down onto the post. We have a stop here that the top of the lock is resting on, taking all the pressure off of the cables at this point, and now on all four corners of the post, we're setting on the lock to where it's safe to work under it, store a car, and you're not worried about it coming off. You can't take it off the lock until you actually raise the lift up. So you have to raise it up till this handle moves about a 1/2 inch. When you see this handle move, tells you now that you can open this up. That opens up all four locks on each post. We have a high tension spring on there to where if something were to go wrong, you let go of this and you'll see that the locks fire back into the post and will stop at the very next lock hole for safety. Now if you were going to lower this lift, you have to open up this lock handle, which disengages the locks, and hold it as you release the lever here on the side, the hydraulic lever. Now the lift will go down with ease. Once you get past the very bottom locks, you can let go of this lever and it'll go all the way to the bottom. When the lift is all the way down the first time, sometimes this hose is twisted, and so what you've got to do is loosen up your connection and then turn this to where your hose has no twist in it, and then retighten it back up so that your hose runs straight out without a twist in it. It's an easy thing to do, and when it's all the way down, there's no pressure in that, so you don't have to worry about any squirt or leak coming out from that fitting.